What's going on, Todd?
I'm just really excited about the zoning code update.
Now, which set of 100 pages are you referring to?
The first set.
The first 100?
Yeah.
Great.
We can start now.
Good stuff.
It is now 4 o'clock. Time for the Municipal Planning Commission meeting to begin. I'll call this meeting to order. Mrs. Blankenhorn, will you call the roll, please? Are we live back there?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor Starr.
Here.
Mr. Sawyers.
Here.
Mrs. Ellsworth.
Here.
Mr. Hawkins.
Here.
Mr. Swallow.
Here.
Mr. Deal. Mr. West.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay. Commission members, in your packets you have the meeting minutes from the April 11th Municipal Planning Commission. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I'll assume they are okay. So is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for the adoption of the meeting minutes. Any discussion? Then all those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, we have a few items on the agenda for today. We're going to try to get these parcels taken care of, and then we're going to move on to a public meeting also with regard to the zoning code update, but just wanted to make sure to review this. This is part of our procedure that I always review this with everybody who is here participating in the Municipal Planning Commission. As a reminder here today, the purpose of the Municipal Planning Commission is to balance the public good with the private property rights and interests. Also, the Commission carries out all other powers and duties conferred upon it by the City of Mount Vernon's zoning ordinance or other city ordinances and the laws of the state of Ohio. This is a public meeting, and there are rules of decorum that we follow. We are committed to the democratic process, individual rights of expression, robust debate, and tolerance for different viewpoints. The following general rules of civility are expected, including addressing others in a respectful manner, no insulting, personal attacks, intimidating, or offensive communications, no harassment, no willful destruction or damage of property, and no disruptive behavior. Please, if you have cell phones, silence them now or turn off any electronic devices and refrain from private conversations during the meeting. If you need to come and go throughout the meeting, you're welcome to do so. Just please do so in the least disruptive manner possible. If you're offering any public comment today, you must first be sworn in by reading the statement at the lectern, and keep your comments to 4 minutes. Again, the purpose of this commission is to oversee that the law is followed and planning concurs with which the spirit of those laws and regulations have been adopted by the City of Mount Vernon and the state of Ohio. So with that, we will begin with our first item. Mrs. Blankenhorn, will you please review that, and then we will start taking testimony.
2024 MPC 07 for 201 Madison Street, parcel number 66-02514.000.
Okay, and who is here to present about this particular case? Mr. Gott, can you come forward, and we'll have you read the statement there, and then the floor will be yours.
My name is Jeff Gocke. My address is 507 West High Street. I affirm that my testimony is truthful to the best of my knowledge and ability, so help me God, or under penalty of perjury.
Welcome.
Thanks. So, thanks for the opportunity to present this today. I'm here on behalf of the soon-to-be owner, Airco Inc., which is a company that does coatings for structural steel. So they're basically like a big painting company, basically. They are in, if you follow Cheryl's excellent coverage in Knox Pages, you will know that they are purchasing Plant 2 at the old Siemens site, which is the one that's up on the north side, the other side of Burgess Street, not part of the main campus there. It is adjacent to the Shelmar site, which is the property we're talking about today. Both of those areas this deal is dependent on both of those areas because the operations of the company will be conducted in Plant 2 So they'll be sandblasting and painting inside Plant 2, but they need the Shelmar site for storage. So I tried to make that come out in our application here, but basically, if you're not familiar with that plant, what it was before was basically a food packaging. They made food packaging. They didn't do the food packaging, but they made the materials there. So it's historically been a manufacturing site going back to the 1930s when the Shelmar company moved here. Madison Street had traditionally been kind of the main entrance. It's the only entrance into the property, right? It's surrounded by a creek, the river, the railroad tracks, and then some other adjacent property to the north. So across Madison Street is the only way in and out of that property. So all deliveries and exits will be made through Madison Street to Sandusky Street to the state route, and then north or south that way. Let me clarify, semi-truck deliveries. So they will be transporting their materials, which are basically steel beams of various lengths, from the Shelmar site, and they'll have to go around to get to Plant 2. And then back again when they're done waiting to be shipped out again. So the Shelmar site will basically just be the staging area for the drop-off and pickup for their materials. There's an existing 7-foot fence around the property, not in great shape, but it will be repaired. And they have committed to working with Shade Tree Commission to put greenery, some vegetative screening along the edges of the property that have residential boundaries. So I think there's 4 houses that are on that, bordering that property, so they'll do vegetative screening along that. I think I included that in the application as well. I do want to make one edit on the narrative statement of use, the very first section, traffic. We've revised down the numbers of anticipated trucks. So they think at peak time, 50 semi-trucks a week will enter and exit that property via Madison Street, and at average traffic will be 25 to 30. So you're looking at 5 a day average,
Okay.
up to 10 a day at peak times. And there's no kind of set, it's all weather dependent, it's construction dependent, right? So we really can't predict when the peak seasons will be. It's based on their business, it's based on the weather, it's based on material availability, et cetera. That was the only edit I wanted to make on the application we submitted. Everything else will be, as best we can tell, minimal noise, minimal dust, minimal, there's no odor. I mean, it's just whatever's associated with truck traffic will be the associated impacts on the property. Like I said, it will mostly just be used for staging. So I think I'll stop there unless any of you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Gotke? This is going to result in, when they're fully functional, a considerable number of jobs for us.
They estimate 200
New jobs. That's
new
all.
jobs to the community, yes. That will be starting at least $20 an hour, $20 to $23 is what they're saying. Of course, that's all economic conditions dependent, but that's what their estimates are. Originally, this is sort of outside of the scope of this group, but originally they have some locations in Georgia. They'll send some of their workers up here temporarily while they build up their workforce here, and then they'll transition them back down to Georgia. But they're ready to go. I believe there's an open house next week, the 15th, starting at 10 or 10:30. You can come by Plant 2 and kind of check out what they've got
They're filling orders right now.
going on.
too.
They did kind of a test load already. They have paused that, and then while they upfit their building, and then they'll start working again. They got to get all this stuff done first before they can start operations again. They will not be doing any business operations there. They won't be blasting, they won't be paying. That would require a separate approval by you all, because that would be a change in use if I understand my city code well enough. This is just for storage.
I'll also note that this requires a conditional use, which goes before the Board of Zoning Appeals next Wednesday.
Okay, very well. Any other questions for Mr. Gotke at this time? And I will open up for public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on behalf of this or in support of this? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against this or in general? If not, then we will continue to move along here. Mrs. Blankenhorn, were there any communications received either through email or phone or calls or anything?
I did not receive anything.
Okay. Generally, I would ask Mr. Ball if there were any engineering concerns, but we've heard they were going to be working with the Shade Tree and Beautification Commission at this point in time. Mr. Broren, do you see any legal problems with this conditional use?
Well, this is the site plan.
The site plan, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I do not see any issues with the approval of the site plan here today.
Okay. Then, and this is a, Mrs. Blankenhorn, is this a recommendation to council or is this a ruling?
I'm sorry.
This is a recommendation to council or a ruling?
No.
This is a ruling?
This is just a review by the Municipal
review.
Planning Commission.
Very well. Okay.
Approve or deny.
Okay, very well. So, I guess we will entertain a motion.
Before we do that, can I have Mr. Gotke come up for 2 questions?
Okay.
Yeah. I have received 2 questions about this site. One, I don't know the validity of this, but I just wanted to run it by you. Apparently there are some eagles' nests in this area.
On the other side of the river.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you communicated with anybody regarding, is there any threat at all to the eagles' nests because of the operations of?
As best my understanding, no.
Okay. That also hit my capacity for knowledge pertaining to eagles' nests.
Yes.
So just want that on the record that, there you go. Number 2, clearly, considering that this is a giant former industrial site and it's adjacent to more industrial sites, some stuff went on there in the past, right? But it's
You're going to have to clarify what some stuff.
of an industrial nature,
Yes, of an industrial nature,
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, all police work aside. Yeah, so, but it's been a while. And those, I mean, even the streets are prepared for that. However, I think some of the new property owners in that neighborhood, and when I say new, I mean even in the last decade or more, may not be aware or used to that sort of truck traffic. So what has, the ADF or this company done to, I mean, obviously we know that we've got the open house and we've got a community picnic next week, but has there been any outreach to prepare that community for the potential of?
The company has spoken with neighbors
Okay.
that have reached out to them. I have spoken with a neighbor, former council member here, about this, the mayor of Marion Street, right? He can spread the word there. We have the open house coming up. I believe the city has done some marketing to try to get the word out, to invite the neighborhood to come see the operations as well.
So there should be no surprises on the west end that
I
stuff's gonna
don't
be-
know what people know or don't know or how they consume media, but we've tried to
there has
do our
been
best.
a good faith effort
There-
into.
Yes,
all
that's
right.
a good way to say it.
Okay, there you go.
I will also add to that, for the Board of Zoning Appeals hearing next week, a conditional use requires a mailing to all property owners within 300 feet. It's a larger outreach than a standard variance, so that mailing has gone out as well.
Oh, yeah, and there was the mailing for this meeting as well.
This was just immediate owners.
Okay.
Surrounding owners, but for the conditional use, that has to go out 300 feet radius.
All right. And did you hit the eagle's nest?
They were not on the mailing address
Okay.
list.
They're not
San
residents
Diego.
of the city because they live on the other
That
side of
doesn't
the river.
matter,
There you go.
though. They're not registered with the county auditor.
Yeah.
Got to be a voter.
Actually,
Mr. Swallow, you had a question as well?
I do, but
no, that's fine.
I'm not sure who to address it to. It's somewhat tangential. Madison Street is wide, but it narrows at North Sandusky Street. And you folks put in an awful lot of work recently on sidewalks and how will the trucks be able to successfully be able to come in and out of this? And secondly, is there plans for a street light at that intersection? I don't know who to ask that of.
I spoke to the engineer about that, about the road width
Yeah.
issue, and he said that has historically been the path that trucks have taken, and he doesn't see any issue with that still being the case.
And the city would be responsible for maintaining that with weight and load issues and deterioration, things like that?
That's correct.
Yeah, but did you talk to the engineer about a street light?
I did not.
Yep. We can look into that. I'll work with the engineer and Mr. Gaki here and the needs of the company, and then potentially, if it pertains, if we find that there are issues with the trucks and the new sidewalk, we can look into a bell system or something. But
Because I was grateful to see that there's a turning lane into Madison Avenue. So I just wanted to ask about future plans.
Yep.
Well, with the side, like what you're saying, if there's pedestrians even at night,
Yeah.
and, if they're, I don't know that they would be bringing trucks at night or whatever.
No. I was more
would still
concerned with all of the new work that was done.
Yeah.
Would there be breakdown?
I'm sure that has been communicated to our contractor with that, knowing that that's going to be a major thoroughfare for the trucks that will be picking up and dropping off, so.
Okay. Just wanted to bring them up.
Yeah.
I didn't think we could answer them, but I just wanted to bring them up. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Then we will entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve this 201 Madison Street parcel, number 66-02514.000, as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for the adoption of, or the approval of this site plan. Any discussion? Mrs. Blankenhorn, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Starr,
Yes.
Mr. Salyers.
Yes.
Mrs. Ellsworth,
Yes.
Mr. Swallow,
Yes.
Mr. West.
Yes.
It is approved. Okay. Jeff, you'll pass that information along to Joe and Glenn and everybody over there. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item then, Mrs. Blankenhorn.
2024 MPC 08-875 Harcourt Road, parcels 70-50046.000 and 70-50054.000. Apply City Zoning District.
Okay. And who is going to be presenting on this particular matter?
Me.
You are. Okay, Mrs. Blankenhorn. Does she have to?
No.
No, you're already sworn in. We already have your blood samples, so.
So, per codified ordinance 1151.09, a proceeding has been submitted for annexed territory to be incurred in one or more zoning districts defined in the zoning ordinance for review by the Municipal Planning Commission. 875 Harcourt Road, the parcels that I introduced were recently annexed. This property houses the Knox County Historical Society Museum and was zoned GB in Clinton Township. General Business District is proposed as the city's zoning district assignment.
Okay. Does anybody wish to speak on behalf of this? Against this, in general? Okay. Mrs. Blankenhorn, do you see any issues with, have you received any communications about this?
So I reached out to Mark Ramser. He has been asking me questions about this property as a representative of the Historical Museum. And because it was recently annexed, it is written into code that the Municipal Planning Commission is supposed to apply city zoning as soon as possible So I asked him if it was okay to proceed with going from Clinton Township General Business to City General Business, and he said, yes, please proceed. So that's why
Okay.
I'm introducing it today.
Very good, thank you.
And there
Mr.
are
Barr?
parcels surrounding it that are owned by the Historical Society already, and they are currently GB as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the answer is no, there are no objections to making this GB.
okay. There's no engineering concerns, I would imagine, with this as well. We don't have to bring in shade tree at this particular point in time. Again, so this is a, will you clarify, is this a recommendation to council then, or is this a ruling?
Recommendation.
Recommendation to
council.
city council, so it will go before city council to formally adopt, so, okay.
Does this landlock anybody?
No. Actually, what happened is that there was this little piece of Clinton Township surrounded by city. So it actually, by moving this parcel that was owned by the Historical Society with their other parcels that they already own into the city, it actually removes sort of a landlocked parcel.
I was just looking towards the north.
Right to the north is the stuff that they own, isn't that right?
No, I mean, what we're annexing in to the north of that, looks like there's two pieces of property, one in the front and one in the back.
It has already been annexed.
Yeah, but so it's not in today's discussion. It's already been discussed.
Yeah, it's already been annexed. We're just talking about zoning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for either Lacey or Rob? Then we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve 2024 MPC 08-875 Harcourt Road, parcel number 70-50046.000 and 70-50054-000, applying city zoning district as presented.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded for the approval of this. Any discussion?
Was that Mr. West that
Mr.
seconded?
West was the second.
So
Actually,
I don't know that he
Oh,
can
he-
second
oh,
it
no,
on
because-
this one because Todd is
Okay.
now going to
Todd's
vote.
Todd's on this.
I'll second.
Okay,
I can vote on this one.
right. So which means he won't get to vote. So
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't take a second from him.
yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Well, we'll keep you in mind for that.
I'll abstain for the next one, and you can do it.
Okay, any discussion? Mrs. Blankenhorn?
Mayor Starr?
Yes.
Mr. Sawyers?
Yes.
Mrs. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Swallow?
Yes.
It is approved. That recommendation will go to city council. You know what a timeline will that go in terms for Monday, or is that a little too early?
Probably too soon
Probably
for
the-
that. I'll get
yeah,
it typed up
28th.
tomorrow or Monday and then submitted to Todd.
Okay, thank you. Very well. Okay, next item.
2024 MPC 10 for Gilchrist Estates Phase 1 plat revision.
Okay, so who is presenting on this behalf? Yes, come on up. We'll have you read the statement there, and then the floor will be yours.
Yes. My name's Andrew Brower. My address is 88 South Monroe Street, Millersburg, Ohio. I affirm that my testimony is truthful to the best of my knowledge and ability, so help me God, or under penalty of perjury.
Welcome.
Hello. It's been a while. I'm here today to request two revisions to the Phase 1 plat of Gilchrist Estates. Phase 1 is residential single-family homes. The first revision is for Lot 13. I understand that there was a typo on one of the meets and bounds printed. So on the original plat, the easternmost boundary for Lot 13 was 153.9 feet. We're requesting a change to 154.65 feet. That'll fully close that lot. The typo caused the lot not to fully close. The other requested revision is for lots 20 and 21. There was a home constructed across these parcels, and a corner of the home encroached into the easement area of the sanitary sewer easement. To fix that issue, the the sanitary sewer easement has been relocated slightly, and the plat revision would just reflect that change or relocation.
And that's what the shaded area is up there that you have
Correct, in
Okay.
bold.
in bold. Okay, got it. Thank you. Any other changes to the?
No
revisions?
other changes. Those are the only two, but I'm happy to answer questions about either.
You said this is for phase one.
This is for phase one.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Brower? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of this revision? Against this revision? Or in general of this revision? Okay. Mrs. Blankenhorn, did you receive any communications with regard to this item?
I did not.
Mr. Byrne, do you see any legalities related to this that could?
No, I don't see any issues.
Okay. Yes. You have to come up and swear in, and then we'll give you, the floor will be yours.
All right.
Yeah, right there by your left hand.
So my name is Dave Serino, and I live at 149 Plymouth Road, Mount Vernon, Ohio. I affirm that my testimony is truthful to the best of my knowledge and ability, so help me God, or under penalty of perjury.
Welcome.
Hi. So yeah, I'm one half of the owner of the house that sits on lot 20 and 21. And we knew about the sanitary sewer, running across our property because, well, you can't miss it because there's the 3 manhole covers. But I guess who was it? I don't represent Schlebel Builders, or?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
I know Roy was going to wave.
Okay.
Okay.
You'll have to address some comments up
yeah,
here,
I'm
and then
sorry.
if you
My
have
apologies.
questions,
It's
we
a
can
question.
bring,
Yeah,
we can
okay.
bring him back. You have to ask the commission, and then we can bring him back up to answer that.
I got you.
Yeah.
All my question is, does the easement actually, how to put this? Does our home actually sit on top of the easement, or is it, beyond the home? Because where my mind is going is, if there's ever a need to, the easement's there for servicing, I assume, or maintenance, So that was it.
Okay. Mr. Brower, you want to come back up and address that?
Sure.
Mr. Sereno's question, please.
I haven't been to the site, but I believe while the home was being constructed, that's when the sewer was relocated. So this fixes that issue, I suppose. So the answer to your question is no. That's kind of the revision we're requesting.
Okay.
So your home does not sit in the easement area.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've gone through here. We don't have any engineering concerns, I would imagine, with this. This fixes that up. Is there any other questions for Lacey or Rob or Mr. Brower before we entertain a motion? Then we will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve 2024-MPC-10 Gilcrest Estates Phase 1 Plat Revision as presented.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded for the approval of the revisions as presented. Any discussion? Mrs. Blankenhorn.
Mayor Starr.
Yes.
Mr. Salyers.
Yes.
Mrs. Ellsworth.
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Mr. Swallow.
Yes.
It is approved. Okay, thank you. Mr. West was ready to jump in there. He was just waiting for somebody to miss their cue. Anyway, okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for. We have very exciting news here. We are going to launch our zoning code update, comprehensive zoning code update. It should be noted that we're not taking any public comment here. This body is not going to decide on anything. We are not ruling, we're not voting. This is a launch, and we've asked Wendy who has been our consultant, guiding us through this rather lengthy, arduous, but very important process over the last year. to go over the highlights. And so, Wendy, if you will come up and guide us through what are the highlights here.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. It has been a long process, but part of that is we've spent a lot of time kind of meticulously going through your current code, looking at what's on the ground a lot of times, being, oh, this is what's been working, but that's not what's really allowed in the code, or, kind of doing a lot of fixing on top of the greater goals of this. So really proud of all the work we did. So yes, so tonight I'm just going to kind of go over the major chapters and what big changes you should be aware of, what the public should be aware of. And then I believe June 6th is when we'll be back to have the formal public hearing process. I do know that the staff has loaded this up onto the website. We will be kind of Monday probably updating the with some cleanup. I've got some graphics to fix and stuff, some minor stuff, but the substantive text of the planning and zoning code is up in place. So with that, I guess I'll let I can. I just have to hit the button.
Well, it's more of a scroll than
Okay,
anything.
let's a scroll. That's fine. We'll do that.
Be able to hit the buttons on the side.
That's okay. So I thought for tonight, I'd kind of go back and start from like, why was I brought on? Why does the city want to do this? So there were a couple of goals going into this. One was just to modernize the regulations. There were a lot of things that I saw. There were a lot of things that I think had been stumbling blocks especially with administration and enforcement, that we just wanted to make better. And so that also leads into the administration and enforcement issues that we've had. We talked about certain things. Should they be in the building code? Should they be in the property maintenance? Should they be in the planning and zoning? I know one of the big things, and I talked to another planning consultant today, every community struggles with accessory uses, in part because there are new businesses coming in that are concerned about landscaping and parking and all that fun stuff. But what do residents care about? Where can I put my pool? Where can I put my, shed? How big can it be? Where can, setbacks? So the residents are very using that highly. And so that's where a lot of discussion came up on this. The bigger goal, and I think you've all probably aware of this, is talking about housing and housing affordability, and that was a major discussion point of this. You're going to have some influence coming off of Intel, but let alone the fact that it's just hard for people to afford housing nowadays, even with a baseline job that is well paying. It's very hard to find affordable rent or affordable mortgages. So we wanted to look at I will call it removing barriers to affordable housing. And I'm not talking about all low income, just the average person can afford it. And I say removing barriers is that we want to open it up. This is not a thing that because we've removed the barriers, it's automatically going to, flood the city with housing or anything. We're just making it easier for people to be able to afford to live in. And also looked at things like overall goals of putting housing where it would be beneficial to the city. So we talked a lot about how can we encourage higher density near downtown so people can walk downtown, or using it as a transitional nature in the commercial corridors rather than kind of scattering it about. And then went from the non-residential standpoint, just making it easier to invest in the city and invest in businesses. We want to keep a high quality of development, don't get me wrong. But where things really, when we had discussions, a lot of us, does that really matter? What's that really going to get us? And if it really wasn't going to get you anything, or if it was really kind of preventing the natural market, maybe we don't need that. And then finally, I always call this flexibility with predictability. We wanted to build in some options for people. There isn't always a one way to fit a mold. But we also wanted to give both applicants and the city some level of predictability. So what the process is, what the expectation of standards are. We'll talk a little bit later about the historic district guidelines were extremely vague. We tried to give a little bit more guidance so that somebody can reasonably read this code and know what they are expected to do. Is there still discretion? Of course there is. But we've tried to give more guidance. And we've also tried to give more leeway to do things better than what is required. If you'll recall, way back in 2022, in the middle of 2022, we issued a code audit report, which was kind of the narrative of what changes we were going to make. And for the most part, I think we've stuck to it. We had major themes for improvements, chapter by chapter analysis, and prosed outline. I believe that's still up there if you want to read that. But the overall themes for that were we reorganized and reformatted this thing. So it looks entirely reorganized. Again, part of that is usability. All the accessory uses, residents only have to go to one chapter to kind of see what they need. They don't have to find their district and then go and find in another section the rules for storage sheds or for swimming pools. We updated review procedures, and I'll talk about those in kind of the chapter by chapter section. We did some restructuring of the zoning districts, and I'll explain why we did that. And then we modernized the kind of what we call the substantive standards, what the things like signs and landscaping and parking, just modernizing them, kind of cleaning them up. And again, this is where a lot of the conversations had. So going chapter by chapter is the easiest way to do this. So you start with the first chapter. This is the one that's got the boilerplate language in it. It's the purpose of this overall planning and zoning code, compliance requirements, separability. We did add a provision that isn't necessarily needed. You don't have to have it by any reason, but it's nice for staff to go, look here. We add a provision that the city is not responsible for enforcing homeowners association agreements or private easement or private covenants and stuff. Because every community I've worked with, they get the calls, this person's doing this. That's not our rule. So it's just there for a nice thing to staff say, listen, that's outside of our scope. Go talk to your homeowners association. And then the other piece that we've added is what we call transitional regulations. Now, we did do a lot of changes here, but I mean, we didn't overhaul it that it is entirely different. But there are going to be people that are kind of stuck in the middle. They've applied, they're going to apply after this goes to planning commission, and it's, what happens to that application? Well, I'll tell you now, they can move forward with the current code. Basically, if they're already formally in the process of a conditional use or something, they can move forward with the current process. They can also opt to use the new standards if they want. So if they like the new sign standards or if they like the new parking, they can opt into that kind of review process. So this is something that'll be kind of beneficial for the first year or two, but then as things kind of consistently get into the new code, this becomes more of a moot point. Chapter 1102 is the decision-making roles and authorities. So this is going to talk about the Municipal Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Historical Review Commission. We gave you have this language in there now, we kind of cleaned it up. An overview of the establishment of each of those review boards. Council is in there. We kind of specify where council has their decision-making as part of this code. Their rules for meetings, their decisions, and the like. Now, you still could have bylaws in the future that kind of talk about some of the things like how long you're going to let people speak, the order of meetings and stuff. That's not in here. I do want to point out that the major kind of decision-making board change we made is that you, the Municipal Planning Commission, moving forward, will be reviewing conditional uses. That is pretty consistent with what most municipalities in Ohio do. Townships and counties, they have to send their conditional uses to their Board of Zoning Appeals, but municipalities tend to have their planning commissions review conditional uses. So that will be a big shift. But what that does is it would mean, for example, the application you heard earlier today would have been heard in one meeting and not necessarily had to go to multiple boards. And plus, when we kind of talked about what is really the role of the Planning Commission, it is looking at land uses and looking at how this interplays with the rest of the zoning. So it just seemed to be more of a fitting role, and so we've made that shift. And then we get into the actual review procedures, and so we've consolidated all but the plan development into this. And this, we have a section, the first section is a summary, but then we followed up with common review requirements. Part of this is trying to prevent inconsistencies in language as we go through these different procedures. So, how do we do fees? Who can apply? What's the timing schedule? all that information is kind of embedded. Public notice, what is the requirements, how many days before, to what distance, published or written, all of that is summarized for one section. And then for each of the procedures, we outline the procedure. There's a very clear step-by-step process. There are review criteria for each, so each board will know what is it that we're trying to look at when we are considering each of these applications. So that's kind of the overview of the existing stuff. We did add in a couple procedures, one of which is the alternative equivalency review. This is kind of getting into the flexibility component of this. If somebody wants to change or do something different than the current code, they have to go to get a variance. But they're often asking to reduce things. So, we're required to have, 20 trees, we want to do 15. So they're asking to reduce it. The problem comes when somebody wants to do something different that actually might be better than what you're looking for. So maybe they want to use public art instead of a fence or screening, and in that, like downtown, that might be appropriate. So it's actually meeting or exceeding, it's not reducing. This alternative equivalency review is what I call a positive variance. They're trying to do something better. They've got some kind of creative idea. So for things like there's a limited scope of this, so they can't apply it for everything, but for like landscaping, fencing, and like outdoor lighting and stuff, they can come to the Municipal Planning Commission. There's a public hearing, and it's done on a case-by-case basis, and they have to show that whatever they're doing meets or exceeds it. We've done the same procedure is available to the Historical Review Commission for the the 3 historical districts where they're doing certificate of appropriateness review, which is nice because a lot of times you're looking at things like materials, and the modernization of materials nowadays sometimes can make it easy to be like, no, look, what we're doing is actually much better than what you're asking us to do. So that is a new procedure that'll give some options of doing something better rather than reducing all of it. We've enhanced the certificate of appropriateness for the Historical Review Commission. We've given them some options that for on a case, like when somebody comes to do a change on a building, if it's a part of the building that can't be seen, or maybe it's an accessory structure that's not part of the context, they can actually take that into consideration and kind of waive some of the guidelines. They don't have to worry about it as strongly, versus if it's the primary building that is a historical component of those districts, they can kind of hold the applicant's feet to the fire. So we give them a little bit more flexibility to look at how much of that, whatever they're changing, contributes to the overall character of that historic district. Talked about the conditional use being moved to the MPC. And then the other thing we did is we added, for the zoning permit process, we added what we call an administrative waiver. And this is essentially a minor variance, up to 20%, only dimensional stuff, so pretty typically like setbacks. They still have to meet the variance criteria, but this would keep minor things like somebody's got a very unusual lot, kind of, it's not a square, and they're going to nip into a little setback or something just because they want to build a square house. And so they're going to be, 6 inches into a 10-foot setback. What this is saying is they can go to staff and ask it. Staff will have the opportunity to either review it and look at the variance criteria and say, yeah, this is a pretty practical difficulty. Yes, you can do it. They also have the option to, if they can't really make a determination, to move it forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So the hope is this will particularly be more beneficial to residents who are looking for minor things for like fences and some of their setback encroachments. We clarified a minor subdivision process for lot splits, consolidations, property transfers. Actually, it was very interesting hearing all the applications today, because I think some of this new code will be keeping things off of yours, because I think some of the provisions we would allow some of these things to be administratively approved. Right now, you've kind of got a vague reference to it. I'm sorry, I skipped over that one too. I should have talked about that earlier. But right now, you kind of have a vague reference to them called a procedural variance of subdivisions. Basically, if somebody's coming in and they're just doing a lot split, or they're transferring properties between lots, or they're consolidating. I'm doing this right now personally. If we're consolidating 2 lots, just make a single lot. that's a very technical kind of review. Doesn't meet the zoning, yes or no? Is it, going to make any changes? We're saying as long as they're not creating planned improvements or doing anything over 5 lots, that staff can look at this. So the city engineer and the zoning enforcement officer will look at it and they can approve it to kind of streamline things. And again, keep minor things off of the board. The establishment of the zoning districts, this is, again, a very basic, you have this chapter now, but essentially sets up, there we go. Sorry, got a little touchy with this. It sets out what are the zoning districts. It sets out like the interpretation of the map and how the zoning has changed between this current zoning code and the new one. This is beneficial because there are all kinds of documents out there that said, such and such was approved for the R1 district or, a district in the current code that may have changed in the new one. And we want somebody able to go, oh, okay, I see this went from the, traffic-oriented commercial district is now general business. Like you can see very quickly how this is in previous documents. So this is just more of a administrative benefit. The kind of big changes, and these are big changes that you should be aware of, but we talked about in the code audit. We divided the R1 district, which is the primary single-family district you have, into 2 districts, allowing 5,000 square foot lots in what's the new R1A. The main reason we did this is because way back when I did a quick analysis of the zoning, the lot sizes, and a vast majority of your older neighborhoods are 5,000, 6,000 square foot lots, which is far below the 8,500 square feet you require now in the R1, which means all of those lots are currently non-conforming. So we said, let's fix this. It's not like people are going to be able to, widespread do lot splits. In fact, most of the time we're just saying you're conforming now. Congratulations. You're not going to see, it's not going to like double the density in this area. It's just making people conforming. You can see all of those red lots are currently non-conforming. And so we're hoping to remedy that by creating this new district. And then the other thing we did is we did add a new R4 district, which is a higher density residential district. We don't have any of it on the proposed map now. It will be for future use. The idea behind this was that there are particular areas of the city that might benefit from pretty kind of urban densities. Like, again, if somebody wanted to redevelop something near downtown, that might be a fitting place to have that density. So we're giving an option to have some higher density residential. They would also have that opportunity going through the plan development process if they were going to do more of a mixed use. This wasn't a big one because it wasn't on the map. We consolidated the traffic-oriented commercial district and the general business district. That TOC wasn't, I don't think it was anywhere to be found. So they're so close, we just made them one district. And then the other thing that I'll talk about again in a little bit is the planned development district. You have 2 planned development districts now, the planned neighborhood district and the planned commercial development district. We've consolidated them. The main reason is the big difference between the 2. There were some design standard differences, but it was really about the uses. We just created one planned development district that gives applicants the flexibility to propose a range of uses. But then the Planning Commission and City Council will ultimately have the decision. So it just gives more flexibility to kind of be creative in these plan developments. And then we've expanded on those design standards, and I'll talk about that later. The next chapter is base zoning districts and principal uses. This one is the chapter that sets out how principal uses, the main uses of properties, are used within each of these districts. The first thing I want to mention, not that you have a ton of this on your zoning map, but you do have the manufactured home park district, which is we've maintained for the purpose of not creating nonconformities. But there aren't that, even for affordable housing, manufactured home parks are not a thing we're seeing a lot of because of the sewer and water issues. So we just want to protect what's there. So we've said it's still there. You can't ask for new districts, but we're going to keep the existing one in place. After that, we've organized all of the principal uses in a use table now. So you don't have to go to different chapters to figure out how things are allowed across the board. You can look at a table and it'll show you where districts, where uses are allowed. If they aren't listed in this district, you've got 2 options. One, you can try to make an argument that they're similar to something else and you would be involved in that decision. Or there are certain things like medical marijuana or marijuana dispensaries. We're calling marijuana now that we're dealing recreational, but dispensaries would be specifically prohibited. So they couldn't come in and try to get in a different way on that way. A couple of use changes to make you aware of. One of the things we recognize, especially in what we're looking as the R1A, is there actually are a lot of 2-family and 3-family homes that are, again, non-conforming. Part of one of the things we looked at is they've been making the arguments they've been around forever. And so we had a discussion about it, and one of the things we are suggesting to do is to allow in the R1A, to allow 2- and 3-family dwellings to be conforming if they, or their conditional use, if they can demonstrate they existed prior to January 1st, 1990, which is roughly when records became a lot better keeping. So if you can't show that you existed with utility bills or some other formal arrangement that you had a 2-family or 3-family prior to 1990, then you can't have it. But if you can do that, then it would be a conforming use. We added a small scale plan, we call it planned housing development. It's different than a planned development district. It's not a zone change. But it's called small scale planned housing development that would give the MPC, the Municipal Planning Commission, the ability to consider alternative housing approaches on a case-by-case basis. So we spell out that you can do things like a cottage court housing development, which would, have one lot built with like a courtyard in the center and houses surrounding it, which is very different than your traditional character that you've got now, but it's becoming popular because they're not tiny homes, but they have smaller homes. We have offered that you could propose a tiny home development, which again would allow the Planning Commission to look at that kind of on case-by-case basis. These are small projects. So we've said, this is if somebody redevelops part of a block or an entire block, but in no case more than 5 acres. So this would be really small development projects that would come through as a conditional use. And again, I didn't finish the sentence there, but this is intended to expand the opportunity for housing choices and different housing price lines. We addressed group homes, homeless shelters, and other transitional housings to align with state law. We addressed short-term rentals. There's limitations on like occupancy based on the size of the building. You can't have big events there. It makes it clear that they're subject to lodging taxes, so I think that should help. Marijuana dispensaries are extremely specifically prohibited, but we have made a change to allow for the cultivators and the processing in industrial districts, in part because they're highly secure, they're all indoors, and the state has so many strict requirements for it that now a lot of communities are looking at that as an economic development project. The dispensaries, again, are prohibited. We've added provision for adaptive reuse of pre-existing buildings, which actually eliminates the need to authorize use variances. So this would allow for, again, the Planning Commission, if somebody comes in and says, listen, I got a church, an old church or an old school in a residential district, I can't really use it as a home, but I got this idea to do something, a yoga studio or something maybe that's not very intense that you could take a look at and say, you know what, in this setting, could work. And so the conditional use or approval would be contingent on that building remaining. Once the building goes, then it's got to go back to whatever the conforming use is. But it allows you to look at those kind of unusual buildings that aren't designed for what the use is. We see this also with like old fuel or like gas stations in residential districts, or unusual industrial things that maybe they're in commercial districts. Now you can look at it from what is the existing building really designed for, and how could it be used to still be compatible. General modernization of all the use language. Each of those uses in the use table, I only showed you a very short portion of the use table, they're all defined to give some guidance for it. And then we've added just a whole bunch of graphics. If you haven't looked already, there's all kinds of pretty pictures in there. A lot of that's just to say, hey, when we say where's a front yard setback required on a corner lot, it's here. Or here are these exceptions. So there's a lot more graphics to show all these type of things. The overlay districts, this is pretty unexciting because we didn't do a lot of change here. We've carried forward the flood damage prevention overlay district. It's really just to put the floodplains on the map, on the zoning map, so you know when you're going to be subject to flood damage prevention, and then it cross-references Title 13. We've carried forward the historic overlay districts. These are for the 3 local districts that the Historical Review Commission looks at. So not downtown, but the 3 districts you have now. We did give a little bit more guidance to vague language. So right now it says something like the Historical Review Commission can look at the height of a building. Are they looking for it to be compatible, or, so we try to give some more language in the guidelines to let them know what they should be looking for. But we also kind of try to take into account the realities of wanting to encourage people to invest in those districts. The planned development districts, I kind of went over that very quickly earlier. We've consolidated, it's one procedure and one zoning district. The plans that have been approved for your current PNDs and PCDDs, those all carry forward. It's not like they disappear. So those plans are just carried forward. It'll just be under the planned development district. But if anybody comes with new ones, they would come and go through the zoning amendment process. They would have a development plan with it. They can propose any mixture of uses that are allowed in the city. So they can't use this to get their dispensary or anything like that, but they can come with any mix without being constrained by the type of planned development. One of the things we did do is we looked a little bit more at the densities that would be allowed, and we kind of came up with this menu of density. So the closer you are to downtown, the higher urban density you get. If you're going to propose some residential in a general business area, that's something that was general business, or maybe next to it as a buffer, you can get a little higher density to do a transition down. PD districts where 70% or more of the dwelling units will be contained, we kind of ratchet it all down to 8 units per acre. I will say that one of the things we added in here after some discussion was that no more than 50% of units in any one of these planned developments can be single family. We're not trying to bash single family, but part of this was we wanted to encourage a more of a mixture of housing types, not just have unfortunately, a lot of planned developments across Ohio, not just in Mount Vernon, are single family developments that really, if you look at them from an aerial, don't look all that much different than one that was built under the standard zoning. So if you really want to do single family only, just go through the baseline zoning, get a subdivision, and go that process.
I think somebody's alarm is going off in the audience. I'm not
It's
sure.
in the back equipment case. I don't know why it doesn't. I've tried to figure out how to turn it off.
I was going to say this.
It's like my fire alarm, my
This
smoke
message will
detector's going off today.
self-destruct in 10 seconds. I'm sorry, Wendy. If you-
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Accessory temporary uses. This one, we spent a couple meetings on this because it's a challenge, like I mentioned. We modernized the list of accessory uses, and we allowed, we addressed things like community gardens that might be part of a school or a church, accessory dwelling units, outdoor dining, rain barrels, all of those things you do not specifically address now. We've allowed for some raising of chicken and livestock, depending on the size of your lot. If it's under 2 acres, you can have like 6 chickens or rabbits or something, no roosters. If you go over that, which you might in the ERRR, you can have some larger livestock, so you can have your horses and that kind of thing based on the size of the property. We did spend at least 2 meetings, as I can recall, talking the intricacies of accessory buildings, because there are so many different types out there: patios, gazebos, storage barns, accessory dwelling units, and talking about what are we trying to achieve. Lacey was very helpful in showing us the things that have come in recently that made sense, and we kind of use those as kind of a balance. So one of the things we did is we have said there's a maximum of 2 accessory buildings allowed on any individual lot. One of them can be a small building, so under 240 square feet, so that can get your storage barn or maybe a small gazebo or something like that. And then the other one cannot exceed the size, it has to be smaller than the footprint of the principal building, but can be larger. Now, to a lot of people that may seem a lot, but then we have to take into account, we also have lot coverage that is focused on buildings. You have that now. We've enhanced that. So that's going to be another limiting factor. So on a small lot, you're probably not going to be able to get one very large building just to begin with. But as part of that, we have opened up the ability to do an accessory dwelling unit. And again, this was really primarily about the trends we're seeing to allow for affordable housing. This is one that we can't say it can't be rental, but we have said, we want that, we want to have that ability because we are seeing a lot more parents living with their kids or kids living with their parents or, multi-generational stuff. We talked about doing this in the code audit. I will also tell you from example, a lot of communities in Ohio have kind of tipped to allowing these now. The city of Cincinnati just started allowing these last November, and they've had like 12 applications. So it's not like people are going to be doing these left and right. A lot of people don't, they might put a dwelling unit out back that's their she shed or, man cave or something like that. But we are opening this up as a possibility for some affordable housing. I know my kids are struggling to find affordable housing. I really don't want them to live with me, though. The general development standards chapter, this is where we kind of consolidated some smaller sets of regulations that didn't stand out to be their own chapter. We've got new language that addresses outdoor lighting. We're not trying to be overly burdensome. We're just trying to protect particularly residential areas from commercial lighting and industrial lighting. We've updated the fencing regulations with clearer guidance on location, height, and design. So you can't use like old trash or doors for your fencing. You've got to use traditional fencing. I know. We've maintained a lot of language you have now on the storage of junk, construction easements, performance standards, and then small cell technology we've moved in here. Chapter 1110, the Central Business District Architectural Standards. This establishes some baseline design standards for the Central Business District. We're not trying to be a historical preservation. You're not going to have to go through the ZOA. We're not even trying to dictate the style, be reflective of the kind of era of some of these buildings. What we are trying to do is keep the kind of form and character of downtown. So things like set to the back of the sidewalk, you can have maybe a little bit more of a setback if you're going to do like an outdoor seating or some dining area. The heights kind of, and then maintaining like a rhythm of the windows and stuff like that. But again, you could build a fairly modern building in there. You have several modern buildings. And again, part of this is trying to encourage infill that feels like Mount Vernon, but doesn't necessarily have to reflect a historical style. Landscaping and screening, we created a modern set of landscaping and screening standards. You have some now. Again, the focus is softening the appearance of extremely large parking lots, but mostly about screening dumpsters and screening storage areas for commercial uses, or buffering between a commercial area and a residential area. So it's really kind of protecting those separation of land uses. We do also build in some flexibility to allow landscaping areas now to be designed attractively for stormwater. So bioswales and stuff and parking areas to kind of use your landscaping for the benefit of stormwater management. Parking access and connectivity, this focus of this was the parking requirements. We still have maintained ratios, so for every single family unit, you gotta have 2 parking spaces, that kind of thing for residential. But for everything else, we've dropped that big table of ratios. And instead, when they come if they come for conditional use or if they go to staff, they will have to say, listen, we're gonna provide 50 parking spaces, and here's why we think that this will work. We have included some standards that would give staff the ability to say, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. But it also gives them the flexibility to look at, is there on-street parking? Is there shared parking situation? To be honest, every community that has these ratio almost exclusively requires way too much parking, even the ones that are dropping them down. And the other reality of this is that most businesses know what they need for parking and are going to put it in. if their bank isn't holding their feet to the fire. This is based on a ordinance I wrote 20 years ago now, 25 years ago in Milford, Ohio, and they have not had an issue with this. If anything, people still put in too much parking. But it's worked out where you're not having to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for, a 5 parking space, reduction. We have added requirements for the establishment of sidewalks for redevelopment projects. If you've got a sidewalk next to you and you're redeveloping or developing a site in a commercial district, you got to connect. You got to kind of keep the sidewalks moving. We've also required them if they've been identified as needed sidewalks in the active transportation plan. So we're trying to kind of get the sidewalks going as part of any redevelopment and development projects. Signs, you're all tired. You are all tired of me talking about signs. We had to do a complete a rewrite of the sign ordinance. You, like everybody else, had an issue with some legal cases that have come up in the last 5 years. Just a few cases, a few issues. Primarily, and I know the mayor, Mr. Braun, and Lacey are all tired of me saying this, but essentially every community has had to move away from regulating signs based on the message. So if you have to read a sign to determine how you're going to regulate it, you're already in trouble. So things like real estate signs, we have to drop that, because how do you know it's a real estate sign? You got to read it. So we have totally switched focus to what type of sign is it? Is it a monument sign? Is it a yard sign, a window sign? We've focused on height, area, setback, and safety requirements, that type of thing, and stayed away from the message. That's pretty easy with the permanent signs, because that's what you're really focused on is it digital? Is it a monument sign? It's a little tougher when we get into the temporary signs, but I'll talk about those a little bit as we get there. One of the things we did is we have expanded the amount of sign area allowed in some instances. Now, we didn't go crazy. You're not going to get billboards or anything, but we were looking at what's on the ground. What are the heights? What are the areas we're seeing? In residential areas, I think we came to the conclusion that the sign area for subdivision signs, the identification signs, were not what were actually being requested. And so we kind of looked at, does those look reasonable? Okay, yeah, let's let them. And so now hopefully there'll be less variances. But again, we didn't go crazy and say, we want them to be twice that size. We just were looking at what the reality of the situation was. So there wasn't a massive increase, but there's more likely than not we've allowed for more because we wanted to err on the side of not creating a whole bunch more nonconformities. We gave more flexibility for property owners in commercial districts and industrial to figure out how they want to do building signs. So we don't say you get so much wall sign, so much projection sign. You get so much building signage attached to your building, and you figure out how you want it. Do you want to do a wall sign? Fine. If you want to do a projecting sign and wall sign, fine. This is how much you get to pick. We've added a master sign plan provision for major developments where they can propose a single plan for the whole thing. Consider this the plan development of signs. This is for major developments, so major campuses like the university or for the hospital. If somebody came in with a very large development that maybe wasn't part of a plan development, they can go through this process and basically say, here is our sign package for the entire development. And in return, you'll get one additional freestanding sign, so maybe it's a development identification sign or something, and you can get a little bit more building signage. So there's a benefit to just planning for the entire thing than kind of trying to kind of spread it out there. Temporary signage is where we had the biggest change because all those signs I talked about based on message, political signs, real estate, all of those were temporary signs. So in all of our discussions and in a lot of discussions with legal here, we kind of came up with an approach where we've said, here's how much signage, temporary signage you're allowed at any one point in time. You can figure out if you want a whole bunch of small signs, you want to do one big sign, how you want to break that up. There is some additional limited signage allowed on special events or something like that, those are time limited to, I believe it's 2 weeks every quarter. So, you know, the businesses can still have their now hiring, grand opening, whatever they want. But that's a tough thing, a tough change to wrap your head around. But it's one that we kind of do to protect the interest of the city while allowing people to have their freedom of speech. Subdivision to sign is not the most thrilling, but we kind of worked on that. This one, we just kind of did a general cleanup. I think it was a set of regulations that had relatively recently been updated. I worked a lot with Brian, the engineer, to try to kind of actually cross-reference the standards they're using when they're using ODOT or when they're using the city-specific ones. We've added a developer's agreement provision, and basically that gives the developer and the city engineer an opportunity to kind of come to a conclusion of, okay, here's when we're going to do inspections, timing, what's the estimates, all of that information that can be then agreed upon as part of improvement plans. And then we've added provision for green infrastructure options, so somebody could come in and propose bioswales or different like green infrastructure instead of it all being concrete. The city engineer would get involved in the review of that to make sure it's best practices. Nonconformities, you had pretty good nonconforming use regulations. We don't have to worry too much about it. Again, due to the lack of records and trying to prove what exists and what not, we went back to that January 1st, 1990 thing. So if you were constructed after January 1st, 1990, you better be able to prove that you went in with a permit or something legally. If not, there's a presumption that you probably were, you probably built whatever you did or established whatever you did prior to that. The burden of proof is always on the applicant, though, not on the city. The other big change we did is that non-conforming residential dwellings can be rebuilt even if they're destroyed completely. Again, nobody wants to tell somebody you can't rebuild your house. That's just a pretty common practice. Enforcement and penalties is, this was a general update. One of the changes we did, and we just need to confirm this, but is we did establish an escalating fees and fines if there's repeat offenders in like 1 year. If somebody comes in and they fix it and they're thinking, this is clever, and then enforcement goes away and they do it again, we've got some escalating fines there for that. And then the final chapter is the definitions. This was completely overhauled. We put it in the back. Again, all the uses are defined. We probably doubled the number of terms that are defined. So it's a pretty hefty chapter, but we're trying to give as much guidance to people who are using it as much as staff to make those decisions. So that is it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Any general questions? Well, we look forward to hearing some robust debate and some also input. We do have a place on our website for public comment. We've got links that you'll be able to chime in. This is very important for us, and so we urge the public to really get involved, because this will probably set the tone for our community for, I would imagine, the next 30 years. This is big, and I will say this, some of the things, and I mentioned to you, Wendy, in the email, what we have done has also, by the way, checked several of the boxes that the Senate Select Committee on Housing has developed in their recommendation list, and so it's good to see that we're in line with the rest of Ohio, as it's not just here that's having issues. It's all over Ohio, and so we seem to be in lockstep with moving forward. So, but it's not approved yet. So we will be meeting, forum of the public hearing will be on June 6th, correct,
Yes.
Mrs. Blankenhorn? Where we will be taking public comments with regard to this, and then this body will vote to send it on to City Council. City Council will then take it from that point forward, and I would assume that this will go 3 readings, and there will be another public hearing that they will have, and so there will be ample opportunity for people to get involved in the discussion. And you can always, if you have questions on it, send. I hate to add more work to lazy or anybody, you can send us some questions and we can kind of explain that. We can also corral those questions, and if we can also lean on our consultant here, Wendy Mueller, for being able to answer those as well. So we urge you to really get involved. This is very important, and like I said, it's probably going to set the tone for probably the next 30 years, I would imagine. So anyway, Wendy, thank you so much for your leadership in walking us through this. And I want to really especially thank Mrs. Blankenhorn for diving in. She's the one who has to almost memorize this whole document here. She and Brian really jumped in. Rob, thank you also. Yeah, it's we're finally here. But anyway, any other business for the good of the order? And we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Just a
Oh, wait,
second.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I just want to let everyone know here and watching online, I have posted Wendy's presentation on the website. It is on the documents page under the zoning code revision, so that presentation is up there. The full draft that is being proposed is posted there, as well as a public comment link. So you can post your comments that way as well, prior to getting to the public comment meeting on June 6th.
Okay, thank you.
And could I get a motion to table this case to June 6th, and then we'll reconvene?
I move to table this case to June 6th.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Any discussion? I think we could probably just do a voice vote here. All those in favor of tabling to June 6th, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? It is tabled to June 6th. Is there any other business for the good of the order here?
To further comment on the public comment link, that again is available through the documents section, under the code revisions section. That is anonymous if you so choose. There are sections for name, address, and whatnot. You do not have to fill that in if you don't want to do that. So let it fly. But there are some questions that prompt you to kind of respond to help us kind of guide, this rollout and how we're going to respond to some of those questions. And then there's just a general question at the end. So if you have comments, if you have questions, go ahead and fill that in, and we can do similarly to what Wendy has done. We can have an FAQ form that we kind of roll out to the public. These are the things that are being asked. Here are the answers. It's easily digestible that way. That way people aren't asking the same thing just over and over again, and we can get the info out there easier. So, or you can come in and sit through a 2-hour meeting about it. So, yeah.
Yes.
So sign J up. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Anything else?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.